There are signs that your life is getting worse on the surface, but stronger underneath. You lose interest in people you used to laugh with. You stop explaining yourself. Your phone gets quieter. Your nights get lonelier. And because you have not won yet, your mind starts lying to you. It says, maybe I am losing myself. No, you may finally be meeting yourself. Most men mistake isolation for failure because they have never seen what power looks like before it becomes visible. Before money, there is silence. Before status, there is rejection. Before authority, there is ridicule. Before proof, there is a long period where no one claps, no one understands, and no one is coming to save you. That is where most men go back. That is where the dangerous man begins. There is a hidden reason why your power era often feels like social death before it feels like victory. If you misunderstand this phase, you will run back to the cage and call it loyalty. You will go back to old friends because loneliness feels too heavy. You will lower your standards because being misunderstood feels too expensive. You will explain your ambition to people who benefit from your confusion. You will waste years trying to be supported by people who only like you when you remain familiar. And one day, you will look at your life and realize the most dangerous prison was never poverty. It was not lack of talent. It was not lack of opportunity. It was the need to remain understandable to people who were never going where you were going. The reason is simple. Your old life cannot follow your new standards. The people around you may not hate your growth, but they often hate what your growth demands from them. Your discipline makes their excuses visible. Your silence makes their noise obvious. Your ambition makes their comfort look like surrender. Your improvement becomes a mirror. And most people do not attack the mirror because it is false. They attack it because it is accurate. So listen carefully, because the first sign looks small, but it is the beginning of separation. Sign 1. You no longer enjoy the same conversations. At first you think something is wrong with you. The same jokes feel empty. The same gossip feels cheap. The same complaints feel repetitive. The same weekend plans feel like a trap wearing perfume. You sit with people you used to understand, and suddenly you feel like a stranger in a room full of familiar faces. This is not arrogance. This is appetite. Your mind is beginning to reject what no longer feeds your future. A man entering his power era becomes allergic to pointless noise, not because he is better than everyone, because he is finally becoming expensive with his attention. And attention is the first currency of power. Before a man controls money, status, influence, or respect, he must control what enters his mind. The crowd wants your attention because your attention keeps you emotionally attached to the crowd. Gossip is not harmless. Noise is not harmless. Distraction is not harmless. Gossip feels cheap because it costs nothing in the moment. But it trains your brain to care about people who have no impact on your future. That is how weak environments steal from a man without looking like thieves. They do not take your money first, they take your attention. Then they take your standards. Then they take your momentum. And finally, they take your future while making it feel like friendship. Every hour you give to meaningless conversation is an hour stolen from the version of you that could have been building skill, strength, money, or leverage. The first sign of power is not confidence. It is disgust. A quiet disgust for the life you used to tolerate. And once that disgust appears, you cannot unsee it. You start noticing who talks about people and who talks about plans, who talks about problems and who builds solutions, who kills time and who converts time into advantage, who needs distraction because silence exposes them, who laughs at discipline because they have already surrendered to comfort. That is when loneliness begins, because most men bond through shared weakness, shared laziness, shared complaining, shared escape. And when you stop participating, They feel judged even if you said nothing. That is the first loop of separation. When you stop feeding the old conversation, the old tribe starts feeling your absence before you ever leave. But conversation is only the surface. The deeper sign is what happens when you stop explaining. Sign 2. You stop explaining yourself. Explanation is often a disguised request for permission. Read that again in your mind. Every time you over-explain your ambition to people who do not understand it, you are secretly asking them to approve your direction. You say, "I am doing this because." You say, "I am trying to build." You say, "I know it looks strange right now, but why?" Because a part of you still wants witnesses. A part of you still wants the old world to bless your escape from it. But the powerful man learns a colder rule. Do not explain fragile power. Protect it. Early goals are weak. Early discipline is weak. Early identity is weak. Not because it is fake, because it has not developed armor yet. If you expose it too early, people will poison it with jokes, doubt, concern, sarcasm, or false advice. And sometimes the most dangerous voice is not the enemy. It is the familiar voice that says, "Are you sure?" A man building power must learn selective silence. Machiavelli understood that power is not only what you possess, it is what others believe, see, and expect from you. When you announce too early, you give people access to your unfinished future. They can question it, mock it, negotiate with it, attach their fear to it. So you stop explaining. Not because you are rude, because you have learned that words are cheap before proof exists. Proof is the only language the world respects. This is why Kobe Bryant matters here. Kobe was not respected because he talked about obsession. He was respected because his life became evidence of it. For 20 seasons with the Los Angeles Lakers, he built a reputation around preparation, detail, repetition, and the mentality that later became known as Mamba mentality. But understand the lesson correctly. The power was not in the slogan. The power was in the private repetition that made the slogan undeniable. The world saw championships. But the real structure was built in empty gyms, repeated movements, studied weaknesses, and a standard most people would call extreme because they are not willing to pay its price. That is the difference between a man who wants to be seen as serious and a man who becomes serious. One performs ambition. The other manufactures proof. You do not need to convince them. You need to become hard to deny. If you are serious about becoming that kind of man, pay attention here. You are already watching videos. You are already collecting ideas. You are already hearing truths that most men avoid. But if you only consume harsh truths and never build a private system around them, you will stay the same man with better language. That is the trap. Inside Patreon, I go deeper into the material that cannot be reduced into public lessons. More direct, less filtered, more focused on power, discipline, strategy, and self-command. If you are serious, do not just watch and feel inspired for a few minutes. Build a structure around the man you claim you are becoming. The decision is yours. Because once you stop explaining, something predictable happens. People call you different. Sign 3. Your old friends call you different. When old friends say, "You changed," listen carefully. Sometimes they are making an observation, but often they are making an accusation. What they mean is simple. You are no longer easy to access. You no longer validate our habits. You no longer perform the role we assigned you. You are leaving the emotional economy of the group. Most friendships are built on an invisible agreement. We do the same things. We complain about the same problems. We escape in the same ways. We stay at roughly the same level. And if one man starts rising, the agreement breaks. He becomes a problem, not because he attacked anyone, because his life starts asking a question everyone else wanted to avoid. What if we could have done more too? That is why growth creates social punishment. The group does not need to destroy your dream. It only needs to make your separation feel painful. It does this with jokes, distance, coldness, sarcasm, small comments, delayed replies, invitations that stop coming, looks that say, "Who do you think you are?" And because most men are not trained for social pressure, they return. They drink again, waste nights again, talk too much again, abandon the routine again, not because they stopped wanting power, because they wanted belonging more. This is where your power era tests you. Can you survive being misunderstood long enough to become proven? Can you let them call you different without rushing to defend yourself? Can you lose the old room without panicking? Because the truth is simple. They are not describing your betrayal. They are describing your escape. And once you escape, your appetite changes. You become harder to entertain. Sign 4. You become harder to entertain. Cheap pleasure starts to feel expensive when your future becomes real. The scrolling, the gossip, the random nights out, the pointless debates, the fake urgency, the shallow stimulation. At one level of life, these things feel normal. At the next level, they feel like theft, because now you understand the cost. The danger is not that one wasted night destroys your life. The danger is that repeated cheap pleasure trains your nervous system to reject effort. It makes boredom feel unbearable. It makes silence feel painful. It makes discipline feel like punishment. And once a man cannot sit with discomfort, he becomes easy to control. Give him entertainment, and he forgets his standards. Give him stimulation, and he forgets his mission. Give him escape, and he stops asking why his life has not changed. A man entering his power era begins to see pleasure differently. He does not hate pleasure. He hates being owned by it. There is a difference. The weak man uses pleasure to escape himself. The strategic man uses discipline to construct himself. This is where most people misunderstand solitude. Solitude does not make you powerful by itself. Many men are alone and still weak, alone with their phone, alone with their excuses, alone with their resentment, alone with their fantasies. That is not solitude. That is decay without witnesses. Real solitude has structure, training, study, creation, reflection, execution. A man who is truly entering power does not just remove people, he replaces noise with construction. This is why the night becomes important. What you do at night reveals who owns you. When no one is watching, no one is praising you, no one is threatening you, and no one is managing you, what do you return to? That is your real religion, not what you say you want. What you return to when pressure disappears. If you return to distraction, distraction is your master. If you return to training, skill, reading, building, and planning, your future has begun to govern you. The world will never see most of this. That is why it matters. Private behavior becomes public destiny. But as you become harder to entertain, you also become harder to access. And that is where power begins to separate itself from weakness even more clearly. Sign 5. You become more selective. Access to you becomes earned. This is one of the clearest signs that your power era has begun. You stop answering every message immediately. You stop accepting every invitation. You stop giving emotional discounts to people who drain your focus. You stop being available just because someone is bored. At first, this feels selfish. That is because you were trained to confuse availability with loyalty. But constant availability is not loyalty. It is often low status. People value what has boundaries. They exploit what is always open. A serious man must study how people respond to access. The common person respects what appears scarce. A ruler does not let every voice enter the court. A serious man does not let every mood enter his mind. Your attention is a private kingdom. If anyone can enter it, anyone can rule you. That is why selectiveness becomes power. You choose conversations that sharpen you, rooms that raise your standard, work that compounds, people who bring signal, not noise. And you stop feeling guilty for the distance. Because you understand something cold. Every person in your life is either taxing your future or investing in it. Some do both. But you must know the difference. This does not mean you become cruel. Cruelty is emotional. Precision is strategic. You are not cutting people off to feel superior. You are protecting the construction of a man who can no longer afford chaos. And this is where weak people misunderstand you. They will say you are acting important. They will say you think you are better. They will say you forgot where you came from. But notice what they are really defending. They are not defending love. They are defending access. They are angry because the old version of you was easy to reach, easy to drain, easy to interrupt, and easy to pull back into familiar habits. The new version of you forces them to face a truth they do not like. They no longer have automatic control over your time, and a man who controls his time begins to control his destiny. That is why your circle gets smaller before your life gets bigger. Weak men fear this. They think fewer people means lower value. But power has never belonged to the man who is available to everyone. Power belongs to the man who knows what deserves entry. Your time is not empty space. It is territory. Your focus is not a mood. It is military ground. Your standards are not preferences. They are borders. And if you do not defend your borders, do not complain when your future gets invaded. This is the stage where your life gets quieter. And quiet scares weak men. Because when there is no applause, no distraction, no crowd, no constant validation, they have to face the one thing they were avoiding. The work. That is why Sign 6 matters. Sign 6. You stop needing early applause. The first years are not for applause. They are for data. Most men fail because they confuse silence with failure. They post the content and no one watches. They go to the gym and no one notices. They study the skill and no one pays them yet. They build the business and no one cares. Then they quit. Not because the work did not matter. Because the world did not clap fast enough. This is childish ambition. Power does not care how early you need validation. The market does not care how hard your life has been. The algorithm does not care how misunderstood you feel. The room does not care about your potential. Everything responds to proof. And proof is built before it is rewarded. This is why Mr. Beast is a useful modern case study. Jimmy Donaldson did not become Mr. Beast because he simply wanted attention. He became dominant because he studied attention. His rise was not just personality, it was obsession with the mechanism, retention, packaging, ideas, pacing, scale, audience psychology. He did not sit there asking the system to care about him. He studied the system until his work became impossible to ignore. That is the lesson. Do not ask the system to notice you. Study it until it has no choice. Most men do the opposite. They make one attempt and demand recognition. They suffer for 1 month and expect respect. They work in silence for a short season and then decide the world is unfair. But silence is not proof that you are failing. Silence is feedback. Low views are feedback. No support is feedback. No money yet is feedback. No recognition is feedback. Weak men personalize silence. Strategic men analyze it. The weak man says, "Nobody sees me." The strategic man says, "What must I improve until they cannot ignore me?" That question changes everything. Because now you are no longer begging for applause. You are building evidence. And once you become evidence-based, your emotions lose the authority to interrupt your execution. This is where unsupported men become dangerous. Not loud, not bitter, not dramatic, dangerous, because they stop needing the world to reassure them before they move. They stop interpreting every delay as rejection. They stop treating every quiet room as proof that they are invisible. They begin to understand that the early phase is not supposed to feel glorious. It is supposed to expose who needs validation more than victory. If you are serious, this is where you must be honest. You are already watching videos about discipline, power, and becoming undeniable. But are you turning those ideas into private systems? Or are you using them as emotional fuel for a few hours before returning to the same habits? That is the difference between consumption and transformation. Inside Patreon, I go deeper into the unfiltered principles behind power, solitude, discipline, and dominance. Psychology. Not soft motivation. Not public comfort. Not public comfort. Material for men who are done collecting ideas and want to build a structure around execution. If you continue only watching but never installing a system, you will keep feeling powerful in your imagination and weak in your routine. The decision is yours, because there is one final sign, and it separates the man who is actually becoming powerful from the man who only wants to look powerful. Sign 7. You become calm under misunderstanding. This is the final sign. You stop needing people to get it. You stop needing family to understand your ambition. You stop needing friends to validate your direction. You stop needing strangers to recognize your effort. You stop defending your seriousness. You stop trying to look powerful. You become quiet because your energy has been reassigned. This is not emotional numbness. This is command. The man building leverage cannot afford emotional dependency. Because if people can make you explain, they can slow you down. If they can make you react, they can steer you. If they can make you doubt yourself every time they disapprove, they still own part of your spine. Calm under misunderstanding is a form of sovereignty. It means your identity is no longer on trial in the court of ordinary opinion. You no longer need the old group to say, "We understand." You no longer need the old environment to say, "We approve." You no longer need the crowd to say, "We see you." You see you. You see you. And that is enough to continue. Not enough to become arrogant. Enough to keep building. This is where the power era truly begins. Not when you feel dominant. Not when you look successful. Not when people clap. But when misunderstanding no longer interrupts execution. The man who can work while doubted becomes hard to stop. The man who can build while lonely becomes hard to control. The man who can continue without witnesses becomes hard to erase. Because his fuel is no longer borrowed, it is internal, and once a man reaches that point, the old world loses leverage over him. So here is the cold truth. Your power era often begins as social loss. You lose interest before you gain direction. You lose friends before you gain allies. You lose comfort before you gain discipline. You lose applause before you gain proof. You lose the old identity before the new one becomes visible. This is why the phase feels like collapse. But it is not collapse. It is extraction. Life is extracting you from the environments that cannot hold your future. And the mistake is trying to drag everyone with you. You cannot bring every person into your next level. Some people are attached to your weakness. Some people are loyal only to your availability. Some people love the version of you that made them feel safe. Some people support your dream only while it remains unlikely. The moment it becomes real, their energy changes. Do not argue with it. Study it. The world is giving you intelligence. Who respects your discipline? Who mocks it? Who becomes quiet when you win? Who appears only when you are useful? Who celebrates your progress without trying to possess it? Who makes your life sharper? Who makes your life heavier? These are not emotional questions. They are strategic questions. Because your environment is not background. It is architecture. It either builds the man or keeps him small. You are not entering your lonely era. You are entering your power era alone. There is a difference. Loneliness says, I have no one. Power says, I am no longer available to everyone. Loneliness says, they left me. Power says, they could not follow. Loneliness says, I need support. Power says, I need structure. Loneliness says, why do they not believe in me? Power says, what proof must I create? This is the shift. Stop interpreting distance as abandonment. Start interpreting it as purification. The higher version of you requires fewer witnesses and stronger habits, fewer explanations and more evidence, fewer friends and better alliances, fewer distractions and deeper skill, fewer public declarations and more private execution. The old you wanted to be understood. The new you want to be undeniable. That is the entire game. Not liked, not praised, not constantly supported. Undeniable. Because once you become undeniable, the conversation changes. People stop asking why you are different. They start asking how you did it. They stop mocking your discipline. They start calling it your secret. They stop treating your solitude like failure. They start calling it focus. But do not be fooled by late respect. Late respect is cheap. It arrives after the danger is gone. You needed support when you were invisible. You needed belief when there was no proof. You needed encouragement when the room was empty. But that is exactly why you had to become your own witness, your own pressure, your own standard, your own proof. And remember the 7 signs. Sign 1. You no longer enjoy the same conversations. Sign 2. You stop explaining yourself. Sign 3. Your old friends call you different. Sign 4. You become harder to entertain. Sign 5. You become more selective. Sign 6. You stop needing early applause. Sign 7. You become calm under misunderstanding. If these signs are appearing in your life, do not panic. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of yourself that needed permission. And that version had to die. The world will try to make you feel guilty for becoming less available. It will tell you that distance means arrogance. It will tell you that discipline means coldness. It will tell you that silence means you have changed for the worse. But understand the game. The old environment always calls growth betrayal when it can no longer control your behavior. Do not take the accusation personally. Take it as confirmation. A man who remains understandable to everyone will rarely become exceptional to anyone. Because exception requires separation. Separation from noise. Separation from approval. Separation from habits that keep you familiar. Separation from people who only recognize the version of you that asked for permission. The lonely phase is not the punishment. The lonely phase is the filter. It removes the audience before the work becomes real. It removes the false allies before the pressure increases. It removes the distractions before your standard becomes expensive. It removes the need to be seen before you have earned the right to be undeniable. So build, quietly, deliberately, without witnesses. Let your discipline make the announcement. Let your skill make the argument. Let your results speak in a language your old excuses cannot interrupt. And when the silence feels heavy, remember this. Silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes silence is the sound of your old life losing access to you. Sometimes silence is the space where your next identity is being constructed. Sometimes silence is not proof that no one cares. It is proof that you have finally stopped living for the people who never carried the weight of your future. Your power era does not begin when the world understands you. It begins when you no longer require the world to understand you before you execute. That is when you become difficult to distract, difficult to manipulate, difficult to discourage, difficult to own, And that is when a man becomes dangerous in the only way that matters. Not dangerous because he is angry. Dangerous because he is governed. Not dangerous because he wants revenge. Dangerous because he no longer needs permission. Not dangerous because he speaks loudly. Dangerous because his life is becoming proof. Subscribe to Depths of Psyche if you are ready to build without witnesses.